Too big, too slow, a flying tank. That's what Japanese intelligence called the P-47 Thunderbolt, a machine so massive, enemy pilots laughed at the thought it could even fight. Yet this clumsy giant would soon rewrite every rule in the Pacific sky. American firepower more than doubled anything Japan had seen, and the Thunderbolt's armour withstood punishment that left others in flames. When Japanese flyers realised their bullets bounced harmlessly from its wings, and command orders shifted from attack to run, contempt turned to dread. What happened in those first brutal encounters shattered all expectations, and exposed a truth Japan never wanted to admit. The real story starts here. April 1943. The Imperial Japanese Army Air Headquarters circulates an internal memo stamped with the words, "Overweight, unsuitable for Pacific operations. The P-47 Thunderbolt, newly identified by enemy intelligence, is sketched in crude silhouette, its hulking fuselage exaggerated, the nose ringed with question marks. Official reports call it a lumbering target, a machine designed for European skies, not the swirling, knife-edged dogfights of the South Seas." In Tokyo, staff officers pass around translated clippings from American magazines, scoffing at the Thunderbolt's empty weight, nearly 5 tons, and its 8.50 caliber guns, which, on paper, seem more suited to strafing bombers than chasing nimble Zeros. Propaganda pamphlets distributed to frontline squadrons repeat the refrain, "Too big, too slow, a flying tank." Pilots are told to expect a clumsy opponent, one that can't possibly climb or turn with the Nakajima or Mitsubishi fighters that have dominated the Pacific since Pearl Harbor. Technical officers dismiss the P-47's turbo-supercharger as an unnecessary complication, a waste of precious aluminum and copper. In staff meetings, the consensus is clear. America's new fighter is a product of industrial excess, not battlefield necessity. Training manuals echo the same logic. Diagrams compare the Thunderbolt's silhouette to the sleek lines of the Zero, highlighting its supposed vulnerabilities. Large surface area, slow roll rate, and a turning circle that, according to Japanese analysts, makes it an easy mark in a close-quarters fight. The official doctrine, circulated to air groups from Rabaul to Saipan, encourages pilots to draw the heavy American fighter into a turning engagement, where its bulk will betray it. "Engage with confidence," one leaflet reads. "Its strength is in its armour, not its agility." Yet, beneath the bravado, there's a note of calculation. Intelligence briefings tally the number of P-47s arriving at Allied bases in Australia and New Guinea. Diagrams are updated as new photographs arrive, each one annotated with guesses about fuel load, armament of Unthinkable, and possible weak points. The skepticism is real, but so is the vigilance. In the war rooms of the Imperial Army, the Thunderbolt is dismissed as a curiosity, a brute force solution to a problem the Japanese believe they've already solved. The old logic still holds. Speed and maneuver win battles, not mass and metal. For now, the official line is ridicule. But the memos keep coming, and the silhouette of the flying tank grows larger on every intelligence map. American and Japanese engineers never saw eye to eye. Not in the factory, not in the cockpit, and definitely not on the drawing board. For the Republic design team, led by Alexander Kartveli, the answer to air combat was always more. More horsepower, more guns, more still between the pilot and the Pacific. The P-47's empty weight clocked in at nearly 5 tons, more than double the Zeros. 8.50 caliber Brownings lined each wing, and behind that blunt nose spun the 2,000 horsepower R2800, an engine so powerful it needed a turbo-supercharger just to keep it breathing at altitude. From the start, this was a machine built for punishment, built to take hits, shrug them off and keep going. Across the ocean, Nakajima and Mitsubishi engineers played a different game. Their fighters were featherweights, stripped of armour, built for one thing, agility. The Zero's Sake engine offered just 950 horsepower, but the airframe was so light it could turn inside anything American pilots put up. In Japanese doctrine, the pilot was the weapon, and the airplane was simply an extension of his skill. Every ounce saved was an extra yard in a turn, an extra second in a climb. Armour and self-sealing tanks were luxuries, sometimes seen as cowardice by the general staff, according to post-war interviews. In their eyes, the best defence was not to be hit at all. This wasn't just a clash of blueprints, it was a clash of world views. American designers, with the full weight of Detroit and Pittsburgh behind them, could afford to build a flying fortress around every pilot. Japanese engineers, facing aluminum shortages and a doctrine that worshipped maneuver, built fighters that seemed almost disposable by comparison. The result? Two philosophies that barely spoke the same language. On one side, the Jug, heavy, armoured umkis, and packing enough firepower to cut a bomber in half. On the other, the Zero, nimble, elegant, and deadly in the hands of an expert. Even American pilots had doubts at first. Too big for the Pacific, some grumbled in letters home. No way it'll keep up with a Zero in a turn. AAF memos from early 1943 echo the skepticism, warning that the Thunderbolt might be outclassed in the swirling dogfights over New Guinea. Yet the Republic team doubled down, betting everything on brute force, high altitude speed, and the kind of ruggedness that could get a pilot home with half a wing shot away. Where Japanese doctrine trusted in the pilot, American doctrine put its faith in steel, oil, and the relentless logic of mass production. To Japanese intelligence, it all looked like waste, until the day those flying tanks started coming down from the clouds, guns blazing, and the old rules of air combat began to crack. Thunderbolts dropped from the New Guinea sky like iron rain. In the August 1943 Tsili clash, American pilots pushed their new mounts to the edge, diving at speeds that left even veteran Japanese aces grasping for answers. Reports from the 248th Sentai describe the moment. P-47s, outnumbered and out of their element, broke formation, rolled into the vertical and vanished below the clouds at over 500 miles per hour. Japanese Oscars tried to follow, but the airframe screamed its warning long before the limits of courage. At those speeds, a Zero's wings could shear off. The Thunderbolt just kept going. Terminal velocity for the Jug at altitude crept towards 725 miles per hour, a number that belonged more to falling bombs than to fighters. American pilots called it a safety net. Japanese pilots called it something else, escape. In the Solomons it played out again. P-47s slashed through bomber formations, then nosed down into steep dives, engines howling, guns silent. Japanese pursuers found themselves in a trap, try to follow and risk structural failure. Hesitate and the Thunderbolts would be gone, already climbing back to altitude, ready to strike again. Energy fighting was a foreign language to most Japanese airmen. Doctrine still clung to the horizontal, those turning duels, tight circles, the dance of wood and canvas. But in the vertical, physics wrote its own rules. The P-47's mass, so often mocked in enemy briefings, became its weapon. With each dive, American pilots banked kinetic energy, trading altitude for raw speed, then using that speed to climb out of danger. Japanese pilots trained to outturn and outclimb found themselves outpaced. We aimed at the wings, yet they did not break, a Japanese survivor recalled. The implication was clear, the old tactics no longer worked. Combat reports from Bougainville told the same story. Japanese formations ambushed from above, scattered as Thunderbolts plunged through at impossible speeds, leaving only contrails and confusion behind. The message filtered back to headquarters. Chasing a Jug in the vertical was a fool's errand. In squadron ready rooms, pilots studied diagrams of the Thunderbolt silhouette, but the numbers on the page, terminal velocity, dive recovery speed, meant little until they saw a P-47 vanish into the clouds untouchable. American pilots learned to trust the Jug. If the fight turned ugly, they rolled inverted and let gravity do the rest. The gamble paid off. Japanese bullets couldn't catch them, Japanese engines couldn't keep up. In the Pacific, the vertical became American territory. The P-47's first real edge wasn't firepower or armour, it was the simple fact that when the chips were down, the Jug could dive to safety, and nothing Japan flew could follow. A P-47 limps back to Dobodura, trailing smoke, its silver skin peppered with holes. Ground crews count more than 150 bullet strikes, some as large as a fist. The right wing is shredded, half the elevator's gone, but the engine still rumbles, oil-streaked and angry. Maintenance logs from the 348th Fighter Group tell the story. One Jug landed with 3 cylinders shot clean off the R-2800, yet the propeller never stopped turning. Another came home with the main spar cracked, hydraulic fluid pouring from every seam, cockpit glass shattered. The pilot steps out, shaken but alive. Mechanics shake their heads, then get to work. They've seen it before. Japanese pilots watch in disbelief. Ki-43 Oscars and Zeros empty their guns at Thunderbolts, aiming for the wings, the engine, the cockpit. The old tricks: hit the oil cooler, set the tank on fire, fail. We aimed at the wings, yet they did not break. That line passes from squadron to squadron, growing heavier with each retelling. After-action reports describe P-47s shedding panels, trailing smoke, refusing to fall. Japanese gunners, used to watching American planes spiral down after a single burst, now see their bullets vanish into armour and steel. The frustration grows with every mission. What kind of machine takes a 20mm cannon hit and just keeps flying? In the ready rooms, pilots swap stories. One claims to have seen a Thunderbolt return to base with an entire cylinder bank missing, exhaust flames licking through the cowling. Another insists he watched a Jug lose half its rudder and still outclimb its pursuers. The phrase "impossible to bring down" creeps into the daily language. Some call it superstition, others call it American over-engineering. But the facts pile up. The Thunderbolt survives what should be fatal. The armour is everywhere, around the cockpit, behind the engine, under the pilot's feet. Japanese engineers, faced with shortages of aluminum and steel, had stripped their fighters to the bone. The P-47 is the opposite. Thick-skinned, heavy, built to take a beating and get the pilot home. For every Jug that fails to return, 3 more land battered, but intact. The numbers become a warning. Attacking a Thunderbolt head-on is a gamble. Even if you hit, it's not enough. Even if you hit, it keeps coming. Word spreads up the chain. Tactical briefings begin to reflect the new reality. Don't waste ammunition in a turning fight. Don't expect a single burst to do the job. The old confidence, one good shot, one less enemy, fades. In its place is something colder. Respect, frustration, and a growing sense that the rules have changed. The P-47, once mocked as a flying tank, now wears that name like armour. The enemy can't break it, can't outlast it. For Japanese pilots, every Thunderbolt in the sky is a problem without a solution, and every battered Jug that lands proves it all over again. A battered fragment of metal, stamped with English words and scorched around the edges, lands on a workbench in Yokosuka. Japanese engineers gather, notebooks open, eyes tracing the unfamiliar curves of ductwork and turbine vanes. The object is a turbo-supercharger, recovered from a downed American fighter. The label reads Pratt & Whitney. To the men in white lab coats, it might as well be a relic from another world. They sketch diagrams, measure the alloy, and argue over the function of each chamber. One engineer writes in his lab notes, "Impossible power, a machine beyond our design." The phrase spreads quietly through the technical ranks. The numbers are hard to ignore. The P-47's R2800 engine, with its exhaust-driven compressor, pushes the Thunderbolt to 41,000 feet, 4,000 higher than the Zero's best effort. At these heights, Japanese fighters gasp for air, their engines losing power as the P-47 climbs past them, still accelerating. Reports from the Army Aviation Technical Research Institute describe the supercharger as a mystery device, something that defies conventional piston engine logic. They cut open the housing, examine the impeller, and realize the Americans have solved the altitude problem with brute force and metallurgy Japan can't match. High nickel alloys, heat-resistant seals, precision bearings, each part a puzzle that Japanese industry simply can't reproduce at scale. In technical briefings, engineers warn that the Thunderbolt's power at altitude changes the rules of engagement. Japanese pilots, once confident in their ability to dictate the fight above the clouds, now face an opponent that climbs faster, dives deeper, and never seems to run out of breath. The turbo-supercharger isn't just a piece of hardware, it's a wall. A barrier between the old world of lightweight dogfighters and a new era of industrial air power. For every Japanese officer who once scoffed at the Thunderbolt's bulk, the message is clear. What they dismissed as excess is, in fact, the source of American dominance. Impossible power, delivered at 30,000 feet and above. A mystery solved only by those with the means to build it. February 1945. In Tokyo, the air staff gathers in a room thick with cigarette smoke and maps. Reports from the Philippines and Iwo Jima paint a picture no one wants to see. Squadrons decimated, pilots refusing to engage, and the same phrase echoing through combat debriefs: Rei-Jin, God of Thunder. The P-47. The numbers are impossible to ignore. 8 Brownings, 100 rounds per second, a wall of lead that tears through formation after formation, In the ready rooms, pilots pass around translated fragments of enemy manuals, searching for a weakness that isn't there. The old tactics, split S vertical loop head-on pass, turn suicidal when the Thunderbolt appears. Survivors call it the wall. You fly into it, and you don't come out. The Imperial Navy's Air Staff issues a directive. Order 219. It's not an order to attack, but a warning. Avoid extended combat with Thunderbolts. Engage only with advantage. Break off at the first sign of a frontal approach. The language is clinical, but the meaning is clear. For the first time, official doctrine tells Japanese pilots to surrender the fight. Raijin is not to be challenged head-on. Not with these losses. Not with these odds. Squadron leaders gather their pilots and read the order aloud. Some stare at the floor. Others grind their teeth. The old pride, gone, replaced by something harder. The maps on the wall are marked in red, each circle a place where Thunderbolts have swept the sky clean. In the margins, someone has scrawled the new rule in ink. Avoid the Thunderbolt, live to fight another day. Morale fractures. The myth of invincibility shattered by a machine once mocked as too heavy to matter. The Raijin nickname spreads through the ranks, half curse, half prayer. In mess halls and bunkers, pilots whisper about the jug that cannot be killed, the American wall that will not break. For the Imperial Navy, the war in the air is no longer about glory. It's about survival, and every new Thunderbolt overhead is a reminder that the old rules are dead. By the end of 1943, captured Japanese reports labelled the P-47 Thunderbolt as a flying tank, yet US records show its kill ratio in the Pacific exceeded 20-1. Japanese engineers, unable to decipher the turbo-supercharger, described its altitude performance as a mystery device. In February 1945, Air Staff Order 219 officially instructed pilots to avoid combat with Thunderbolts whenever possible. Despite hundreds of Japanese intelligence documents, details about how High Command weighed the psychological impact of the P-47 remain classified. What is clear from surviving testimony and orders is that the same aircraft once mocked as too heavy forced a fundamental change in enemy tactics. Today, declassified records confirm the Thunderbolt's size and firepower rewrote the boundaries of air combat. In the Pacific, weight was no longer a weakness. It became the edge that turned fear into a weapon.